It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Joe Jackson. Today, joining me, as always, is my co-host, Craig Bowers. Craig, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I feel like I never left the podcast. By the time we finished last night, I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off all day long, just trying to get stuff done and get ready for this one, and basically just feel like the headset never really came off.
Yeah, at least this time we have some lighting, or actually some pretty good lighting, I would say. A little bit better than Mackey Arena when the lights were off.
If we lose our lighting tonight, we got bigger issues.
Probably if that happens, then our show is probably done for the night. Just going to throw that one out there to everybody. But yeah, today we have a special guest, and Craig, I'll kind of let you intro him.
Yeah, let's bring him in. Today with us, we have Erik Haslam from Haslametrics. I know a lot of people just seeing interactions back and forth that follow us and what we do. Also follow Erik Haslam. So we wanted to bring him on a little bit today as we talk about the schedule, the Purdue basketball schedule going forward, and just talk to him a little bit about what playing with metrics around basketball means and what Purdue's season might look like based on what that's telling us. How we doing today, Erik?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Can't
doing
complain.
Doing good.
Why don't you tell us a little bit first, just for the people who aren't real familiar with what you do on your website, just a little bit about what you do and what your website has to offer.
Yeah. So a few years ago, I probably going back a full decade or so, I just decided, I had an engineering background. I had a computer science background. I was a big fan of college basketball, going back to my first NCAA tournament that I can remember was 1990, one of my favorite tournaments ever. And I just instantly fell in love with college basketball. And going about a decade ago, I kind of had the background for it, and I know that the ratings were out there, but I kind of wanted to do it my own way. I didn't want to rely on other people telling me who were the best teams. And there were 351 teams. And of course, we've grown another 10, 15 teams since then. But I kind of wanted to devise a way and tap into my engineering background and my computer programming background to see if there was a way that I could kind of rank the teams myself. And that's it. All started from there. It started with simple Microsoft Access applications and scripts. And then I kind of said, well, I don't want to recreate the wheel. I kind of want to end up doing things a little bit my own way. And so I formulated an algorithm that was based on shooting situations, shooting success, and then shot selection, since, ultimately the points on the scoreboard are what matters the most. So I kind of went away and did my own thing and just kind of built this up brick by brick over time. I started with regular old ratings and added bracketology and the automated projections and the game summaries. So over time, this was, at one point, just a little shack that has kind of turned into more or less a castle over the last 7 years. So I kind of went, public with my site, I want to say back in 2015. So that would make this, my 9th year or something like that, 10th year going into it. Yeah. So it's, it's amazing how time flies. It was just a small little thing at first, but it has kind of blossomed into something a little bit more as time has gone along.
Right. Yeah, no, it's awesome. Oh, you go.
Go ahead.
I was I'm a stat major, stat undergrad, econ master's degree. So I'm a big numbers guy. Love just diving into your site. Got sites like that. KenPom obviously is another big one. I'm curious how much tinkering when you first started, how much tinkering until you were kind of confident in it, and even now, is there kind of off-season adjustments you almost to just kind of the algorithm in general to be hey, I think this might be a little bit more accurate or whatever for future seasons?
Yeah, for the most part, I probably landed on my core baseline algorithm, at least 95% of it, probably within the first year or two. So by going back to 2016 or so, there probably isn't much of a difference between the algorithm in 2016 and what it is today in 2023. Occasionally I will make a little, touch a little bit here and there. And, like one of the things that I even changed this offseason was something to do with the weightings. You look at a game, one of the things, and we can talk about this a little bit, but one of the things that a lot of people who follow me on X or Twitter, I talk about analytically final. And analytically final is one of the things that I did going back to the very beginning was truncate game data after the game is no longer in doubt. Meaning if you're up 31 points with 7 minutes to play, don't include the last 7 minutes because the team that's up 31 is probably putting their 11th, 12th, 13 men in the game. And that's not a true indication of how good that team is. So the analytically final portion of things, you have to kind of change the weighting because if you have if it goes way early in the game, you don't want that game to be weighted as much if it went analytically final earlier. So then you have to kind of weight into, take into account what happens when you have a full sample of Michigan versus Wisconsin, and then Purdue versus Wisconsin goes analytically final very early. You have to change the weightings on that comparison between Purdue and Michigan in that situation. So I made some changes in the offseason based on the weighting, kind of taking a little bit away from those rare performances where a game went analytically final earlier than later. Those are the kind of things that I kind of look at in the offseason, try to tweak it a little bit better, thinking what makes sense. And for, those are the little things that go into it. But other than that, I would say probably 95, 96, 97% of the algorithm stays pretty static going from season to season.
That's fair. I have one quick follow-up, Craig. I'm sorry. Just because it's about the analytically final. You've had, if I remember right, you've had one game in the history of it that's like where the teams come back even though they were like analytically final, correct?
I believe it's twice. The one that everybody would know about would be the NCAA tournament game between Texas A&M and Northern Iowa. And that was a game, I believe the lead was something like 11 with 31 seconds to go. And they came back, forced overtime, and won that game. Texas A&M did. The other one is lesser known, but I believe it happened just I can't remember if it was a few months earlier or a few months later. And that was Nevada playing against New Mexico down in the pit. And that was where Nevada, I think it was Nevada, came back from way down. It just made a ridiculous number of threes to send that game, I believe, in overtime. And I think they won that one. So within a span of, I think it was about 6 months or so, you had two of them. And outside of that, since I started things in 2014 and 2015, I have never seen it happen again since those two games.
That's crazy.
Yeah, unfortunately, our main host, Greg Braggs, couldn't be with us tonight, which is really unfortunate because he hosts a bunch of Chicago Bears stuff, and I believe you're a Packers fan, right?
I am a Packers fan. I'm sorry to say that this year because it has been a bumpy ride so far.
All right, well, I'm going to do my best job here to ask a Greg Braggs question. Out of all the data analytics sites, you have us ranked the lowest at 6. What's up with that, Eric?
It's out of my control. Well, it is in my control, but it's just a matter of, when it comes to selecting your variables for the preseason, you have no live data to go off of. You obviously want to use some of last season's data to a certain degree, but what you're doing is you're bringing in prestige a lot of the time. And, what qualifies as program prestige? Is it the last 2 years, the last 4 years, the last 10 years? For me, I look at the last 3 primarily and put a little bit of front weighting on recent play. But other than that, you just kind of have to pick your variables and hope for the best. And what you do is you're creating a linear regression model, and you're selecting a bunch of different variables from returning minutes, returning points. Is there a coaching change? What are your recruiting rankings? How many 5 stars are you bringing in? How many 4 stars are you bringing in? What is the contribution from your transfer class? So I have roughly, I'd say probably about a dozen independent variables that are used to predict what the dependent variable is going to be, in this case efficiency or offense or defensive efficiency, and then I basically let it go and I just kind of go with those variables, and whatever it spits out. It's not gonna, I always tell people in any circumstance, take preseason rankings with a grain of salt. We don't know how these teams are going to mesh. You see a lot of players coming over more now than ever. You have mid-major players coming over to the Power 5 conferences, and they may play just as well, or they may completely collapse. We've seen that. We've seen A year ago, North Carolina, if I told you North Carolina was not going to make the NCAA tournament, you'd laugh me out of the room. But every expert told you that North Carolina was the best team in America at this time last year. So that's where I always kind of say, be prepared for what you're going to see throughout the season. You're not, these teams that everybody's picking top 5 are probably not going to be top 5. You're probably going to have a team probably 20, maybe 26th in my rankings or 34th in my rankings, who's probably going to be a top 10 team at the end of the year. We just didn't see it coming, and the experts usually don't see it, and sometimes the analytics don't even see it.
So I shouldn't be setting up a gambling schedule for the rest of the year based off of what it says right now.
Well, that's probably a smart pick. I would never go all in on analytics to begin with. I think you need a mixture of analytics and the eye test. I think analytics, I always say, is like evidence at a crime scene. It'll get you leaning in a certain direction, but I still think you need to put your eyes on the product and understand why you're betting on certain teams, or if there's another element that the analytics cannot capture.
You brought up the freshmen, and that's kind of been the thing that's always intrigued me with like yours, Ken Palm's, Torvik, kind of is like the big 3. How difficult is it to just incorporate them? I do Big Ten coverage also, and so I watched film on every freshman like coming into this year, and like it was impossible to find stats and video for half of the guys. So how do you kind of take that into account, knowing that you have, and even the data you do have could very well just be pretty faulty?
Yeah, you're pretty much at the mercy of another rating system at that point. And I don't do any rankings of freshmen. I don't watch any high school basketball film or anything like that. So I have to rely on, in this instance, I rely on 24/7 rankings. They're the ones who go out there and they have team rankings. They show out the 5 stars. They have an overall composite ranking of how they think the recruits are going to impact their team. I looked at a bunch of other ones and I kind of went with them. It seemed like a pretty good estimate of how solid a recruiting class is. It's largely a lot of experts will look to that as kind of the guiding light of off-season recruiting. So I kind of just incorporated that within my model for the preseason. When it comes to that linear regression model, I only use that during the preseason, but you need to have all these different variables. And if you can't get them on your own, you kind of have to rely on other people other experts telling you who's good and who's not. I hope they're right. But if someone directed me somewhere else and said, hey, these recruiting rankings are far better, I would definitely take a look at them.
It seems like you like to interact and have a lot of fun on Twitter as well, whereas some other people that do this don't necessarily banter on Twitter in the same way that you might. Yeah. And I see a lot going back and forth between you and Purdue fans. So is it true that we're your favorite fan base on Twitter? You
guys are pretty much my favorite fan base because you guys are so fun about it, because every year I cannot help myself. I'm known as Mr. Kiss of Death, and you'll see it throughout the season. I'll say something out there. This team is blowing this team out. And the next thing you know, it goes the other way, 16-0 run or something like that. And then people come up to me, kiss of death, kiss of death. So I know how superstitious Purdue fans are. So I can't help myself by saying throughout the year, nothing can possibly go wrong this year. This is the one year where it's a lock. It's 100% guaranteed to go to the Final Four. And I just sit there and I wait for all the Purdue people to come out of the woodwork and just literally just say, Erik, you're killing us. You're literally killing us. And I just sit there and laugh and I throw my little memes out there with the evil smirk or something like that. But that's the fun of the whole thing. Never anything that I say, my rankings or anybody else's rankings, it really doesn't matter, because what's going to unfold on the court is going to dictate everything. I don't believe in that kind of stuff with superstition or anything like that. So I can only tell how good a team is going to be up until a certain point, and it can turn south, just like that. We saw that unfortunately last year with Purdue losing to Fairleigh Dickinson. Nobody saw that coming in a million years. But I try to have fun with it. I think a lot of people kind of take the game of college basketball a little bit too seriously. We're not curing cancer here, folks. This is still a game, and I like to have fun with it. That's why I keep things a little bit light on Twitter, and usually the people that follow me kind of like to do the same.
Yeah, that's fair. I think so. We have one more question, then we're going to move on to more like the Purdue schedule. Be a pretty quick one. Have you Have you ever, when you kind of populate for either the new season or just something in season, have you ever seen like a team ranking and it almost makes you question
Oh, sure.
kind of your algorithm a bit, where you're just like,
Oh,
man, this feels
sure.
way off.
And I think the one that was last year was, and you're going to have those exceptions. I think that the team that just sticks in my head was LSU last year. LSU, I think, started the season at like 24th or 25th, and that was all program prestige. But guess what? The whole Will Wade thing happened. And then all of a sudden, everybody leaves and he's gone. And it was just a shell of a former team. It was not indicative of what you truly see with these teams. I mean, a team like, you can have an off year for a Kentucky or a North Carolina, but they have that reputation. So even if they have an off year, they're probably going to reload pretty quickly, either that next year or the year after that. So something like that is understandable. I can almost see it coming. A lot of the times when you have a lot of guys graduating and all of a sudden the team goes to nothing, you'll still see maybe a team a little bit higher than they probably should be. I'm thinking like Obi Toppin when he was with Dayton. If I just look at last year, and use that as the prestige, Dayton's going to be like probably number 15 in the country. And they finished 108th for me that year after Toppin was gone. So you kind of have to look at the overall picture of things, say, I want to go back 3 years, but then you have to ask the question, how many years is too much? If I go back 7 years, and I look at, say, LSU of 7 years, is that truly indicative of the LSU program today by looking at the average of the last 7 years? Probably not. I look at 3. I just kind of settled on 3. That seems right to me. But even then, you're going to have some missteps along the way. It is a rough estimate. It's not always going to be perfect, but that's the way all preseason rankings pretty much are.
Yeah. So knowing that, and knowing that preseason rankings are far from perfect, as we move in and look at the Purdue schedule here, what's Haslametrics saying about the Purdue schedule as we look forward a little bit this year?
Well, I ran through it a little bit today, and I can certainly say it is definitely loaded. I mean, you're looking at,
yes.
I mean, especially right there in the middle of or late November when you see Gonzaga first, and then you're following that up with Tennessee, and then the TBA is either likely going to, assuming they hold serve against Gonzaga and then probably play Tennessee. If they win those 2 games, then you're talking about Kansas or Marquette. and then lump that in with these other teams that you got in there, like Arizona and Alabama, and then even some of the quote unquote cupcakes are not such cupcakes. I'm looking at a team like Samford. They're starting the season with Samford, and that was a team that was 16-36 during the COVID years. They're 42-22 since. They've gone up over the last 4 seasons in my rankings from 328th to 271st to 198th to 126th. So that's a team that's moving up. Same thing goes with Eastern Kentucky, and that's the last non-conference game on the 29th of December. That was a team that was 13-18 2 seasons ago. They were 23-14 last year. So you always are going to have some cupcakes along the way. I think it's natural to schedule those. But boy, when you look at the teams that you've scheduled with Gonzaga, any of those teams in the Maui Classic, assuming they beat Gonzaga and go to the winner's side, you're looking at Alabama, you're looking at Arizona. Very powerful teams. Xavier on paper should have been a tough team. Still going to be pretty good, but without that front court, without Hunter and without Fremantle, that is a team that has really been gutted by injuries. Purdue should hold serve there, but I mean, across the board, I mean, a really solid non-conference schedule there.
Yeah, as we look at some of those, especially like Big Ten games where we're playing true road games. There's some that creep up to me and just look like games that are going to be harder than what the metrics might say or what we might look at and say on paper. And like 2 of those for me are always at Rutgers and at Wisconsin.
Right.
And I think, where's the Wisconsin one? Yeah, you actually have us losing. So you have us losing 4 games, but right now, like if we're just going to go right now, there's 4 games and the 4 losses are Alabama and Toronto, Wisconsin at Wisconsin, Illinois at Illinois, and Tennessee if we would match up with them in the second round in Maui. So how do you factor in that home court advantage when we go to a place like Rutgers or Wisconsin?
Well, I don't, and that's one of the things that I've looked at in the past, and I've just kind of shied away from it. So what I use within my model is I use a standard away versus home, a weighting system that goes across the board for everybody. But I thought in certain instances that wasn't necessarily good enough. So if you go to my site and on the main page, at the very top, you can select a different rating set. And one of them under there is a fingerprint. And under fingerprint, there's an AFH rating. That's away from home. And that's going to be the ones where you're going to look at it and say, how does a team perform away from home versus on its home court? And like you said, Duke, Rutgers, those are those teams that are going to probably score pretty poorly away from home. Not necessarily because, they're horrible away from home, but just that they're so strong at home.
Right.
And so that's why I decided to add that little rating out there. So if you choose to, you can kind of take that into account when you're making your wagers or whatever. But as far as the algorithm itself, it uses a standard home versus away rating in that one.
You got something, Craig?
Yeah.
I didn't know if you had a thought.
Go ahead. I was going to throw it to you.
Okay. But, I guess I'm I just completely lost. I'm going to be 100% honest.
Train of thought has been derailed.
Yeah, it was. I'll get it back in a second.
Looking at our Big Ten games, one of the ones that, in terms of current spread right now, and again, it's preseason, that kind of shocked me. It was as big as it was Michigan State. I know that game's at home. It's a 5-point spread, but it seems like all the computer models don't love Michigan State as much as like AP rankings and coaches rankings and all of that sort of stuff. When you get that kind of disparity, I mean, is that just a lot being weighted on their freshman class coming in by people who are looking from the outside? Yeah.
I mean, you got to look at what they were last year. I mean, that's a team that struggled for a good portion of last year. And a lot of people, it's kind of, the recency bias to a certain degree with a lot of the stuff you see in college basketball. Nobody would be talking about Florida Atlantic the way they are if it wasn't for their run. If they lose that game to Memphis in the first round, nobody's talking about Florida Atlantic today. They're talking a little bit, but they're not talking top 10 like some people have been talking. You got to keep in mind that Michigan State, and I've seen this with other teams that the analytics haven't loved so much, and I'm thinking another one is like Miami or even Florida Atlantic, is that they were just not a fantastic team throughout much of the year, and they bring back a lot of the same players. And that's great that they bring back the same players, but we've seen this in the past. I've seen great examples of instances where teams have brought back the entire starting five and they played worse the next year. Now, in fairness to Michigan State, they do have a phenomenal recruiting class. You're bringing in Xavier Booker, Cohen Carr, Jeremy Fears, but these are guys who have never played a single minute of college basketball. And athleticism is one thing, but playing within a team unit and making the smart decisions on the court is a completely different thing when you're presented with teams like Purdue and Indiana and Maryland and Illinois. It's a completely different ballgame. So on paper, I mean, I look at Michigan State myself, and sure enough, yeah, they look fantastic. These kids have a lot of talent. But you got to remember, and Purdue can probably attest to this more than anybody else, they're freshmen. And freshmen are gonna have a limited upside. You're waiting for them to kind of make mistakes. That was the reason why, even though Purdue had one of the fingerprints that I loved of a championship team last year, which is top 10 offensive efficiency and top 35 defensive efficiency, there were only 3 teams that had that last year. It was Purdue, it was Houston, and it was UConn. And I picked UConn, and that's why I won my bracket pool, because I picked UConn. But the reason I didn't pick Purdue was because of the freshmen and the freshman influence. And I think that potentially could hinder Michigan State's longevity as far as how far they can go in the NCAA tournament this year. Because if they rely too much on those freshmen, I tend to think that the freshmen kind of just, kind of crumple up and die a little bit under the March lights. Yeah.
Hey, we've got a few people that are listening who have questions for you, and then we'll let you go. We like to be respectful of everybody's time and try to keep it at least half an hour or less. So a few fan questions here. Dick Stillwagon wants to know if Wisconsin is a tournament team this year.
I think they are. I thought they would be actually last year. And the reason I say that is there's a lot of people who don't like Greg Gard around here. I live in the Madison. I'm 10 minutes away from the Wisconsin campus. I'm a grad there. I'm a letter winner. So I know the campus really well. And a lot of people don't like Greg Gard, but they don't like Greg Gard from his recruiting prowess. And I'm like, well, you're playing within a system. It's not a sexy system. But I will say this about Greg Gard. Greg Gard gets the most out of his players, very much like a Tony Bennett at Virginia. What was it, 2 years ago? He won the Big Ten championship outright. And who saw that coming? There were a lot of people that didn't pick them to be in the top 40. And that was a team that could have won it outright by themselves. They ended up getting an ejection or something like that in that last game against Nebraska. And as a result, they lose to Nebraska. They tie for the Big Ten championship 2 years ago. But if not for that slip up, they win the conference outright. So I kind of look at Greg Gard and I like Greg Gard. I think Greg Gard is good for the program. I don't think he's going to get the sexiest recruits, but at the same time, I think this team is good enough to make the tournament. Certainly. They bring back, again, we're talking about bringing back people like Michigan State does. Wisconsin's the same boat. They're bringing back pretty much everybody with the exception of Jordan Davis. And Jordan Davis was, in my opinion, not a great, he was no Johnny Davis. I'll say that. So no, I think that they have the ability to bring in AJ Storr from St. John's. I think this team definitely can take a step forward. They went to the Final Four of the NIT last year. I think they should be a better team this year, and especially with a healthy Tyler Wall.
Yeah, and then that's the wrong person. We had another one just come in. Shara just wants to know that she's mad at you because the only game that she has tickets for is Alabama, and and you've got Alabama beating us. So
well, and Alabama's another team. I think the way I liken it is like when it comes to like the preseason rankings, I compare them to players in the NFL making the Pro Bowl, and it seems to me like sometimes the player that is at the end of his career who didn't really have a great season makes it into the Pro Bowl and overstays his welcome, and then the guy who comes out of nowhere and has a great year with he's a cornerback who has 7 interceptions or 9 interceptions gets ignored. And I've seen this in the past where guys kind of like stay a year too long if you're old, and if you're fresh on the scene, you kind of don't get the respect right away. And I think that's kind of maybe a little bit what's going on with Alabama. I think they take a step back now because you don't have Brandon Miller anymore. I mean, you lose a lot of scholarship players from what is it? A ton of personnel losses. There were 2 NBA first-round picks they lost. It was Brandon Miller and Noah Clowney was the other one. And you lose 7 guys who averaged over 5 points a game. So, again, are the analytics relying a little bit too much on the prestige of Alabama there? I don't know. I think you could probably find examples where it would go the other direction. So you kind of try to find a perfect balance between the two. So we'll see if Alabama's overrated or not.
Brad kind of brings up a good point with that game too. Is there's a chance that crowd feels like a home crowd with how big
Right.
Zach Edey is up there and how much of a fan base he has in Canada and Toronto specifically. So that could be interesting too. I had a couple other people send me a couple of things, but one would be Spotted Cow fan or no?
No. Okay, boy. I knew that was coming. But I'll say this. One of the things when you live in Wisconsin, the 3 things everybody sells outside of state, sells it as like the greatest thing ever. 3 things. Culver's, which is really, really, really good. Cheese curds, which I think can be meh sometimes. And I'm sorry, New Glarus, completely the most overrated beer, if you're a beer connoisseur, is Spotted Cow. And it's not even the best beer in its brewery. Right now, they got a Staghorn Oktoberfest, which is excellent. They've got a Moon Man, which is way, way better than Spotted Cow. So I think the whole thing is, I mean, to their credit, they marketed it, beautifully. They don't allow you to purchase it anywhere else. You have to go get it in Wisconsin and then take it out of state. But for me, most of the Wisconsin people look around and go, well, if you guys got Blue Moon where you are, right? There you go. Blue Moon basically is Spotted Cow, in my opinion. Yeah. And most beer connoisseurs I know kind of have, share the same opinion.
Yeah. So my son lives in Belmont, Wisconsin, with my ex-wife. And so I've been going up to Wisconsin for years. And somewhere along the way, like the Spotted Cow just became this thing of like, oh, you got to buy it when you go to Wisconsin. I thought, I've had it plenty of times. Like,
I mean,
it's whatever.
I mean, if your other options are Bush Draft Light and Miller Light and something, of course, yeah, I'll take Spotted Cow all day long. But you know, when you're in Wisconsin, where we're basically raised on drinking and raised on beer, you can go down, find, throw a stone and hit 5 breweries in Wisconsin. There's so much to try, so many IPAs, so many Oktoberfest, so many Maibachs in the spring. Winter Skulls will be coming soon. We try, so many different bars and around the Madison area. It is literally nuts as far as the beer options around here. So when you have that, all of a sudden, Spotted Cow isn't so special anymore.
Okay. The last question I got to ask you is, everybody sent me to one place to get a bra on campus before the game. And I was not blown away by the place. Where do I get? I come up every year and, or not every year, but the last 2 years I've come up and taken my son to the game. Where can I hit up to eat right around campus? That's a great spot. Oh boy.
That really depends on the kind of food you want. Man, I got some good ones. There's a little town.
You can DM me a full list later. But
I mean, my wife and we're both foodies, so we love a lot of. So there's a town called Stoughton, which is just a little bit southeast of Madison, and has some of the best restaurants there. Some of the best. They have our favorite Mexican restaurant there called El Rio Grande. They have another place there called. I'm drawing a blank. Well, there's a place called the Viking Brew Pub. I am drawing a blank all of a sudden on like my favorite restaurant that I just because I'm talking so much I can't stop to think about it. But there's a lot of options down there, and even if you go down on State Street, that's much more the student scene. But even there, you're going to have a place like Portobello and good Italian food. There's all the different options up there. You really can't go wrong. It's just a great place to be when you're, especially like on a game day, just wandering State Street, going up to the Capitol and back is just, you're going to find something that's going to hit the spot.
And campus was really nice. Really enjoyed walking around that campus in general and just being situated right inside of Madison the way that it is still. So.
Yeah, Wendigo was the name of the place, the restaurant in Stoughton that I was saying. I was like, man, that's my favorite restaurant. That's my date night place with my wife. And
I gotcha.
A little bit of a hike from Madison. You're talking about a 10, 15-minute drive, but in my opinion, Stoughton is worth the drive.
All right. Well, you're probably going to get a free meal from them after they see the pitch. So, Joe, you got any more questions for Erik?
I do. It's just gonna be a few minutes. It's probably gonna be it's a lengthy answer. So
okay,
if we're cool with it, I'll let it fly.
Let's do it.
It just kind of popped back into my head of like analytics are becoming more and more used. Coaches talk about it. Force mid range, keep away from the rim, and 3 on vice versa on offense, defense. Do you think there's like for coaches that maybe aren't as like analytically sound and they don't have like an analytics guy on their staff, do you think that there's almost going to be a way of like misusing them and where it's like it's almost harmful for them to like quote unquote use them because they're like not actually understanding what it truly means?
I think that's probably true. I think and I think it's just kind of the analytics kind of evolved to a certain degree. And I'll use an example of go back 10 years ago. Were people talking about encouraging a mid-range 2 10 years ago? I don't think they really were. And a little story I told was, back when Haslametrics started, a buddy of mine sent me a copy of the Basketball Times, and a writer in there had cited me about mid-range percentage. We're talking like 2016 or something like that. And it turned out so I talked to the writer and I'm like, how did you hear about me? And he said, from Rick Bird's staff at Belmont. And I was like, I don't know Rick Bird. I've never spoken to Rick Bird really. But Rick Bird was one of the first people that really kind of encouraged this mentality of, I'm going to discourage my own guys from taking the mid-range 2, and I'm going to encourage it defensively. And now you see that more and more. But now the great thing about evolution of analytics is you take it a step further. This is the beauty of the game. And this is the chess match. Where all of a sudden you might have a coach that's going to say, well, if everybody's going to encourage the mid-range game, how about I really teach this to my guys? We practice this a lot so that we are the most efficient mid-range shooters since everybody's going to encourage it. So I see this more and more where all of a sudden now people are taking it to the next step and encourage. And now all of a sudden they're encouraging their own players to take the mid-range a little bit more because they know defenses are going to encourage them to do so. So that's kind of one of the things that I see as we go along. It's kind of this evolution, this chess match. But as far as, the analytics, can they be misused? Yeah, I think any number can be twisted and turned. It's kind of it can be cherry picked, just like anything in the world. You can make any argument that this guy was the best president, or that guy was the best president, or this guy was the worst president based on these facts. And they always tell you half the story. You can do the same thing with analytics. You can say, well, hey, look at this. This guy did this and this. You're looking at a subset of data. If you look at all the data, that'll tell the true story, but a lot of people won't do that all the time. So on occasion, yes, the analytics can be misleading. That's why I say, hey, use them like evidence at a crime scene. It's not an open and shut case, but you got to use your eyes as well.
It's fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see someone said there to eat at the old fashioned downtown. I noticed that. That is outstanding. The old fashioned is great. Good
deal. Good deal. Well, Erik, really enjoyed having you on and just listening to you talk about analytics in general. There's at least 4 words that I'm going to go look up in the dictionary when we're done tonight. Joe did not look like he was confused at all at any point, so that's great. That's what Joe brings to our show. So, but thanks again for coming on, and we'll keep looking for you on Twitter. Give them a shout out to what your website address and your Twitter handle is, just so people know.
Yep, Haslametrics.com is the web address. If you guys want to find me out on Twitter, or X as it is now known, my handle out there is Haslametrics. Like I said, Purdue, one of my favorite fan bases. I keep it light. I think this college basketball is not curing cancer. I think this should be fun. It's still a game. So if I throw a few memes out there, I'm probably going to be the most meme-tastic analytics guy you're ever going to meet in your entire life. But that's kind of the personality that I like, in people. Just kind of keep it fun, keep it light, have a good time. There's only one winner at the end of the year. We're all losers outside of that. So, just have fun with it.
All righty. Well, thanks again. It was really insightful, and hopefully everybody listening got a lot out of that as well. So,
yeah, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
All right, Joe. And then there were 2. We're going to talk just a little bit here about. We're not going to go in depth, right? Like if you saw a schedule preview show and you thought we're going to break down all 32 teams that Purdue potentially might face throughout the year, that would be a 6-hour show. We are not going to do that. We're just going to hit on some highlights of things that we're really interested in as we approach the year. So you want to start out with most excited for or most scared about?
I'm going to quickly interrupt and actually throw a curveball and just shout out our Twitter. We're under 200 followers away now. Once we get to 1,000, this signed Zach Edey jersey that you see here will be going to one of the followers at Boilers in Stands on Twitter. Follow, retweet the pin tweet. You're entered. Like I said, we're at 802 or something like that last time we checked. We're getting very, very close. So if you've not done that already, definitely go do that. Let's start with scared, because then we can finish with excited. So this is, me and Craig just kind of beforehand put this together. 5 games that we're each kind of most scared for, or most worried about.
Most worried about.
Yeah. So for me, 1 is Alabama. I'll just read through the list, then we can talk about it later. We have pretty similar lists on this one. 1, Alabama. 2, Tennessee. 3 is at Illinois. 4 is at Maryland. And 5 is MSU for me. And then Craig's is 1 is Tennessee, 2 Alabama, 3 at Maryland, 4 at Illinois, and then 5 at Wisconsin. So our 1 and 2s are flipped, our 3s and 4s are flipped, and then we have different 5s. Let's start with Alabama and Tennessee. I know we're not going to go crazy in depth, but what about those teams kind of worry you, or that game in general?
I mean, did you watch Tennessee and Michigan State? Like,
I did.
like everything that worried you about the Arkansas game worried me about watching Tennessee. Like, super athletic, going to get up into you on defense, going to pressure. I mean, not that much unlike the team that Tennessee had when we played them in the Sweet 16 a few years ago with Carson. Like, they still have the same identity and the same imprint. And then you bring in a guy in Dalton Connect who's actually a transfer from University of Northern Colorado, who drops 28 points against Michigan State, and he's a long 6'6" wing, which we know is something that we know is something we're worried about, because if we're going to go with a 3-guard starting lineup, who's going to guard that 6'6" wing is something that we got to think about a little bit. So those two things combined, just their defensive intensity and pressure, they forced a lot of turnovers against Michigan State in that scrimmage. And the crazy thing about it, Joe, is in that game they don't have Ziegler, and they don't have Vescovi. Like, they don't have their starting point guard in that game, which is a pretty darn good player. I think he was predicted to be on some all SEC teams going into the season. Like, they did that. I mean, that would be like us doing that without Braden. So I just, the style of play that they have, and then what they showed me offensively in terms of what connected, coming in as a transfer, that one's really high on my radar. In terms of Alabama, I think I would have been a little bit more. I might have had Alabama 1 before these scrimmages. And I know we don't want to take away too much from the scrimmages, right? But Alabama went 0-2 in their scrimmages, and everything I've seen about Alabama from their like media, local media that covers them, is that they seem to have a defensive identity like they've had under that coach in the last few years. So if they aren't that typical Alabama, we could group Alabama, Tennessee, Arkansas all in kind of the same style of defensive pressure, I think, a little bit there. If they aren't that, then they just are a little bit lower on the list for me than Tennessee.
For me, Alabama was ahead of Tennessee because Alabama we've seen it, they can just get out and run. And I'm a little concerned about Purdue's transition defense in general. Alabama, just like Arkansas, super long, athletic team. The one thing, I mean, Tennessee is still number 2, so this is not me being like, oh, Tennessee isn't good. The only thing that with that exhibition against MSU was that, they ended up only winning by 1. They got out to a 17-1 lead. And in that, the defensive pressure definitely was part of it, but it also just felt like MSU was just like, here, take the ball and go score. Like, I think there was a little bit of just like MSU came out so flat that kind of inflated Tennessee. But just, I think, if Alabama's probably less talented, but just the ability to get out and run like they can is like, that has the chance of just kind of, I'm not saying I don't think it will, but that has the chance of just kind of shutting down Purdue in an instant. 3-4, I'm at Illinois, at Maryland. You have them flipped. Probably I would assume the 2 toughest road games of the year. For me, Illinois, I think they're the 3rd best team in the Big Ten. I think Maryland's the 4th best team in the Big Ten, and I have a little bit of a gap after them. Maryland's a tough place to play. I think we can just pretty much just think of what happened last year at Maryland and just be like, okay, yeah, that can happen. At Illinois, like this, I'm a believer in the Ty Rodgers point guard thing, and if that happens, now their smallest player of the starting lineup is a 6'6" wing. Purdue, as of right now, like they're doing the 3 guards, even if they throw Morton or Heidi or whoever in at the 3, like it's just a ton of length that they're going to have to defend. Illinois is going to be a team that can get out and run. Also, just both of those stylistically, I think those will be, the 2 of the toughest games that they have all year.
Yeah, and I've been to the games at Illinois the last couple of times that we've played there, and when it's close there, to me, that's one of the better environments in the Big Ten now. It was pretty sad for a while back in like the Carson Edwards era, but it's back to being loud and raucous again, and it's going to be an intimidating environment if that game's close. I went Maryland over Illinois strictly. I mean, we're cutting hairs here, right? But both can apply a lot of defensive pressure. Both are relatively long. For me, Maryland having Reese as somebody that can truly provide a little bit of post-defensive pressure versus Illinois, in my mind, like Dane's just not a great defender down low.
Erasure.
Huh?
This is Coleman Hawkins erasure, but it's fine.
Coleman Hawkins, what?
Erasure, like not giving him credit.
Okay. No, I'm like Coleman Hawkins or whoever that Illinois has trying to defend Edie. I still don't buy it completely, so I'm going Maryland over Illinois there. And then we differ for number 5 here.
Yes.
You have MSU at home. I purposely did not put a single home game on here just because Purdue typically tends to play completely different and play at an extremely high level and shoot the ball better at home. I still don't buy the MSU is that much different. Like when I watched their scrimmage the other day, like Carr is going to be crazy athletic and make a few crazy wild plays. But how much is he going to be a focal point? How many points is he actually going to get out there in any game? How many true minutes is he going to get out there playing the 4 behind Malik Hall? Provide some electric moments, but I don't know that he moves the needle necessarily. And they still don't have a post presence, man. Like they just don't. I don't buy Sissoko or Cooper. And when you really, the only thing they run a post offense through is Malik Hall, and that's been an experiment they've tried year after year after year that just hasn't really come to fruition.
They fed him in the first half of Tennessee. He had 3 post fadeaways, and I was shook. I had no clue what was going on.
Yeah, I put what did I put? I put at Wisconsin.
At
right?
Wisconsin. Yeah,
I've been to the Kohl Center the last 2 years, and I just like Greg Gard has a way of slowing the game down so much and making it murky, and that place gets crazy loud. Even though there's that the student crowd there isn't incredible, but they pack that place and it gets loud, especially down the stretch. Every time that I've been there, and for whatever reason, it seems like every time we go to Wisconsin, even when we think we should blow them out, it ends up being a game that comes down being a 3 or 4 point game at the end of the night every time.
I went MSU because there's a couple of reasons. I'm bought in on MSU. Like I think they'll have the only knock on them for the perimeter is that they're small. Purdue is not going to be a team on the perimeter that's going to overwhelm them. I believe they have the best perimeter defensive trio in the Big Ten, and I don't think it's necessarily close. They're going to pick up 94 feet, I think, every time, and we've just seen what Purdue can do against pressure. The reason I thought about not is because what Edie's done the past couple games against them is like if they can get the ball to Edie and he goes for 40, like it's over. I also put it on there because it's the third to last game of the year. Now they play at Illinois the game after and then home against Wisconsin. So it's not the easiest last 3, but like there's a scenario where this MSU game is for the Big Ten championship. And I know some Purdue fans are going to roll their eyes at it because it's Final Four or this is like, a bust or whatever. But like there's a legit chance that this MSU game is like the winner takes the Big Ten or winner sets himself up to only go and having to go 1-1 in the last week to take the Big Ten. And we'll kind of transition it because it flows pretty well into our most excited. And for me,
hold on, we got to shout out Braggs here. He's talking trash in the. He saw that Dick Stillwagon called him out about his math prowess, and he's jumping in there to let him know that he's a math expert and not to be talking trash anymore to him. So Greg's still listening, even though he's not with us.
Jeff Park said, beware of Booker by the time that MSU game comes. That's very, very true, too. He's going to need time. He could be that. He's probably more of a 4 to me than a 5, but even then.
He was playing all backup 5 minutes in that scrimmage.
He played some 4, too. I have the rotation chart.
Okay. I just Carter and Greg said all 5, but anyway, let's move.
One, but...
Yeah. All right. So 5 games most excited for.
And for me, number 1 is MSU. I think it could be for the Big Ten championship. I am in on MSU and what they do. I think there's a chance that the Purdue MSU game is like the game of the year, period. In terms of just pure like excitement, I guess the worry is that, like I said, Edie just goes for 40 and it's not really a close game, but I think it will be. That's why I do have MSU 1. I'll read through mine. 2 is so 1 MSU, 2 Alabama, 3 is at Illinois, 4 Gonzaga, 5 is IU at home. Craig's 1 is we're also throwing in like potential matchups in this. 1 is Kansas, 2 Gonzaga, 3 Arizona, 4 MSU, and 5 is IU at home. Tell me why Kansas is 1 for you.
So I love when we play teams that we don't typically play. So yeah, I'm super excited to play against IU, super excited to watch the game against MSU, and multiple other teams along the way also. But I really like when we play those out of conference teams. And I there's nothing about this Kansas roster. You'll also notice that Joe and I approach this difference, right? You'll notice that I had no teams on that list that I also included as like games that scared me. They were games against really good teams that I feel super comfortable about. And looking at that Kansas roster, there's nothing that scares me. The only thing that scares me is the point guard Harris Jr. Trying to control him and pick and roll, but they can't shoot. And people talk about Purdue's shooting woes. Like they have fewer shooters than we got. The offense looked clunky. Man, I've always wanted to just kick the crap out of Kansas, and I would love to see us get to that championship game in Maui and just drill them.
Doesn't if I remember in the past few years correctly, doesn't Dickinson randomly just turn into Klay Thompson against us?
Yeah, but not last year. He hasn't shot well. He hasn't shot well from outside.
I just remember
sophomore year
2 years ago, and he hit like 4 threes and was doing his thing. 2 Gonzaga, I have them number 4. I think I'm most excited. Like the Xavier game should be solid. You know, Haslam or Erik already kind of mentioned like they have some injuries in that, so it's not as and not as like hyped as a matchup. So that Gonzaga game, no matter kind of what you think about them, they should still be solid to good, if not better. It's going to be the first like legitimate test in Maui, all that. Like that's why they make the list for me. You have a number 2 though.
I do, and I'm excited to play them. I think they're a really good team, but I also think it's a team that we match up well against. It's not a team that necessarily gets up into you, applies a ton of super tough defensive pressure or anything like that. So I think it'll be a fun matchup. I think they'll be high scoring, but I think it's a team that we can handle and get a feather in our cap. Now, my question about Gonzaga this year is like, who's their stud? Because every year, as far back as I can remember with all of Gonzaga's years, they've had that one guy that was an All-American, you know? And I just don't know that they've got that stud this year.
Yeah, that's fair. That's probably why they're more 4 for me, is just a little less excitement coming from them. I'm going to backtrack to Kansas because I was curious. I wanted to look it up. So 3 years, Hunter Dickinson was at Michigan. First year, he did not shoot threes. Second year, he was 2 for 3 from 3 and 10 of 14 overall in the game at Purdue. And that's the game I was thinking of. And then he was 4 of 6 from 3 in the other game when he was at home. Last year, I think we only played them once, correct? If I'm remembering correctly. And he went, I just had it. He went 3 of 7 from 3. So he is 3 of 7, 4 of 6, and 2 of 3 from 3 against Purdue in his career.
Nice. What do you got next?
3. You have 3 is Arizona. And honestly, like now that I think about it,
you didn't put them on either list.
I just don't. Okay. I'm going to throw out my small little caveat here of like, I know the Big Ten. I am very, very, very confident in like at least having an understanding of the Big Ten. Not saying all my takes are right or anything like that, but like I put in a lot of work and research of like knowing the Big Ten. I don't actually know what's going on with the rest of college basketball that much.
Yeah.
And so like I know Arizona is going to be solid, but they're not going to be like as potentially good as usual. Now that I think about it, like I live in Indy. That game's going to be in Indy. I should be probably more excited for that. And if I was to redo this, it might make the list. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a game I didn't have any vibe about it at all. Like I'm pretty clueless when it comes to that one.
I just, to me, Arizona is a blue blood or a fringe blue blood. And just a team. I don't remember the last time we played Arizona. So I'm always excited when we get those type of matchups and certainly one that's close to home in Indianapolis. Caleb Love brings a different dynamic to that team, and we've seen him hit big and we've seen him crash big. And like, what will that storyline be this year, and how will he play against us? I'm really interested in that matchup. I see Jones matching up against him defensively. So that gets me excited just watching those two, Jones trying to clamp him down in that game. And then you got Balo and Krivas, a 7-foot center and a 7'2" center, that play in a completely different way than what Zach plays. So just, seeing how Zach handles that defensively, those things all get me a little bit excited about that game.
That's fair. I was looking up, last time Purdue played Arizona was 2017, the Battle for Atlantis. At that point in time, Arizona was ranked 2, Purdue was ranked 18.
Oh, that's right.
And Purdue ended up 5th in KenPom by the end of the year. And Purdue beat Arizona by 25 for 7th place in the Battle for Atlantis.
That Battle for Atlantis, that whole series was nuts because I do think going in, Purdue was supposed to come out of that side and Arizona was supposed to come out of the other side to meet in that championship game. And then they end up meeting for the last place game. And one of the teams that beat us, whoever beat us in that first round that year, wasn't supposed to be very good going. Yeah. And then they ended up being really good by the end of that year. So Battle for Atlantis is always super weird, though. My son's mom, my ex-wife, went down to that one year, and just talking about the size of that arena, like it's super small. The ceilings are really low, and the lighting's super weird out there. So it's like a shooter's nightmare, just in terms of compared to a normal background for what you're used to shooting in.
So no, that's fair. I'll jump to mine. My game, third most game I'm excited for is at Illinois. I know there's beef in general between Purdue Twitter and Illinois Twitter. I love this Illinois team. I love this Illinois team. I love Coleman Hawkins. I love Terrence Shannon. Marcus Domask is great. Like, I'm very excited to just watch Illinois like that against Purdue. But then two, I think it's a good, it was on one of the games I'm most scared for, like both of us, is I think it's towards the end of the season, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, second to last game of the season. I think it's a really good test of, like, that's another team that should be pretty long, can play up tempo. And in terms of the Big Ten, you're not going to get too many teams like that. That's going to be getting into March pretty much right after that. Like, it'll be a good test, I think, of, okay, where does Purdue stand against handling pressure? Where does Purdue stand against a ton of length? So when you take kind of my almost fanboy type of this Illinois roster combined with, I think it'll be a really good test for Purdue. That's why it lands number 3 for me. That's the wrong one. For number 4, we already talked about Gonzaga. You have MSU there. I don't know if you.
We already kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting just watching that. Like, Tyson Walker went nuts in their home game. It's going to be one that's super exciting because it's going to be towards the end of the season, and it's going to be when it really, really matters for the Big Ten, in my mind, between those two, and also that Illinois game that you mentioned as well. But I just enjoy the opposing ways that those two teams, as of right now, I don't know that Izzo has always been that way, but as of right now, how they want to score and like how those opposing forces, which of those opposing forces works out. And then number 5, I have IU at home. And quite frankly, I'm going to be blunt about this. Man, I don't think IU is going to be very good this year. I don't think those pieces fit. I would not be shocked if they finish 9th or 10th in the Big Ten and miss the tournament this year. And I think that will be a game that we get a lot of revenge from losing twice last year and just blow them out at home. So I am super excited for that.
IU makes it because it's IU. Like, I don't know if there's too much to say. I almost put the at IU game because I do think that Purdue matches up well with what they could be good at, with just, if things work, it's because they have a ton of size and they get enough shooting. Purdue obviously can kind of help mitigate some of that. Yeah, I don't know what else there is to say other than it's IU. It's a home game. The crowd's going to be insane. Like, what else is there to say?
There's not much. So I think that pretty much wraps us up for the night. Hopefully you guys enjoyed Erik and everything that he had to offer here. Make sure you hit subscribe, hit the like button, share us out. Follow us on Twitter on Boilers in the Stands. We're a couple of hundred followers away from giving out that free Zach Edey jersey. Mad Sizz asked in the chat if he missed Erik. Yes, you did. He was on for the first 35 minutes. So watch the replay on YouTube or catch us on Apple or Spotify tomorrow. And you can hear what Erik had to say. Brad says, Joe, we appreciate all that hard work in the big. I primarily put this up here to say, what the hell, Brad? Why is Joe getting all the love? Why don't I get any love? But whatever, man, is what it is. I understand. Joe puts out videos daily. I just get on here and talk. So it's perfectly fair, Brad. I get it. I get it.
Fair enough. We got anything else, or are we good to wrap this?
I don't. We are not going to Midwestern goodbye this thing like Greg does at the end of every show. We are going to lock and load and go. Thank you to all the listeners. Tune in Monday night for the post-game show on Monday against a team in Sanford. Don't be surprised if that score is closer through a large part of the game than you think it might be. And then catch us next Wednesday. Catch us next Wednesday night with Konzo. We're going to have him on and talk to him for a while about his days at Purdue, what he's doing now, and get some great messages from him on that night. So,
yeah, make sure you like, subscribe, all that stuff. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Lots next week, three-ish shows or whatever. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll catch you guys in the next one.